Hello everyone, welcome back. Tom with Capo Fetish. Today on the channel, we're going to talk about our favorite panned records. Records that critics despise, they've never liked. Some of these records you may despise. So I'm going to start it off here with one of my favorite albums by this particular band. When critics talk about this particular album, they put it at the very bottom of the list of this band's discography. They think it's shit, worthless, etc. For me, it's one of their best albums. I think it's an album with subject matter that anybody can relate to. I'm talking about 1975's Soap Opera by the Kinks. I bought this album brand new back in 1975. I was 10 years old. Loved it right off the bat. The songs were catchy and very infectious. I understood the concept right away about a rock star wanting to become a normal person. But neither did I know that it would become a very prophetic album for years to come, as I would work in an office 30 plus years and experience all the boredom and unfulfillingness that went along with it. So Ray kind of sums up the album in these lyrics off the song 9 to 5. And it goes, answering phones and dictating letters, making decisions that affect no one, stuck in the office from 9 until 5. Life is so incredibly dull working from 9 to 5. Amen, Ray, amen. I can relate. Another song called When Work Is Over, he says, when work is over, he likes to hit the bars, go down the boozer, and take another jar because drinking can help ease the strain of his boring occupation, dull conversation, living by the book and the rules and regulations. And for me, that sums up 8 to 5 work in an unfulfilling office job to a T. And it's just an incredible album. The critics thought, this is not serious enough. It's not quadrophenia. It sucks. This is just, this is boring stuff. I think anybody can relate to these lyrics, especially anybody working in an office for so many decades. And that's not just even one great thing about this album. The songwriting is fantastic. The playing's fantastic. I think the Kinks are at a peak here on their concept period. Love Preservation Act 1 and 2. And I love Schoolboys in Disgrace. This one for me, though, is the standout of all those concept albums, and it's still one of my favorite albums of all time, and a top 3 Kinks album. Soap Opera by the Kinks from 1975. Another fine album the critics absolutely despise. I think this band never put out a bad album. 6 great albums in 4 years' time, not bad. And I'm talking about The Doors' Soft Parade album from 1969. Yes, there are a few not so good at songs on here. Tell All the People starts off the album. It sounds a little bit like Perry Como, written by Robbie Krieger. I still don't mind it. But this has some really, really outstanding Doors songs on it. First of all, the title track, The Soft Parade, that ends the album, is one of the most demented tracks the Doors ever created. With that spoken word intro by Jim Morrison, Petition the Lord with Prayer. And then it goes into all these different parts, little prog in there. Just fantastic. Wishful Sinful is a great track. I think that was written by Robbie Krieger. Running Blue, Wild Child's a great rocker on side 2. You've got Touch Me, one of their fantastic singles for that brass section. The song, what is it called here? Shaman's Blues is great. And then I have to admit, Easy Ride is not one of my favorite tracks, but I'd give this album a solid 4. Critics hated this album. They thought this spelled the end of the Doors forever. They still came up with 2 5-star albums after this, Morrison Hotel and LA Woman. Always loved the Soft Parade, but it's always considered the worst Doors album with Jim Morrison. Another one that the critics really despise, especially in the 1979 edition of Rolling Stone Record Guide, is Janice Joplin's album, I Got Them Old Cosmic Blues Again, Mama, from 1969. They seem to think that this was not the direction that Janice should have went in after Big Brother. I love the Cosmic Blues Band. I love the brass section. The title track is a killer Janice Joplin track. I mean, she's just singing her heart out on Cosmic Blues. You got To Love Somebody on here from the Bee Gees. Does a fine rendition of that. You got Little Girl Blue, Work Me Lord. What is wrong with this album? Rolling Stone, they were always full of shit most of the time. You know, they hated Led Zeppelin from the start, hated a lot of bands from the start until they became popular. Then all of a sudden, oh, these were great bands. But yeah, I think Try is a great track. Maybe One Good Man. I don't think Janice Joplin ever put out a bad album. And this is a fine album coming after Cheap Thrills, going into Pearl. And again, it was rated 1 star in the Rolling Stone Record Guide back in '79. I don't know how people feel about it now. I think it's fantastic. So Janice Joplin's album, I Got Them Old Cosmic Blues Again, Mama. Another great panned album. Another album that's really, really considered a horrible record, but I find something very charming about this record. And I love this artist. I got into him about 8 years ago. And I'm talking about Leonard Cohen's Death of a Ladies' Man. Produced by psychotic, crazy man Phil Spector. Yes, it's not the classic Leonard Cohen we know from past albums, but I think it's kind of a charming record. I mean, who couldn't like a song like Don't Go Home with Your Heart On, right? Very, very, very humorous. I love the first track, True Love, Leaves No Traces. I like this album. It got a 1-star review, but I still dig it. I don't think there's any Leonard Cohen album I dislike, but this is considered just a low point for Leonard Cohen. I can see what people are talking about, but if you just open your ears and your mind, I think you dig it. Death of a Ladies' Man by Leonard Cohen. Another one, too, that's considered one of their worst albums. I love just about this entire discography by this band. Jefferson Airplane, their album Bark, came out in 1970. This is almost towards the end of their career. Their next album would be Long John Silver. This has one of my favorite Jefferson Airplane songs of all time on here. Pretty As You Feel. Such a mysterious, just strange, eerie track. Great vocals by Grace Slick. You got new member Papa John Creech on violin on here, and new drummer Joey Covington. And of course, you got Jorma Kaukonen. I always had trouble with that last name of Jorma Kaukonen. His incredible guitar playing all the way through this album. I love his track, Third Week in Chelsea. That's really cool. I don't think he gets enough credit, Jorma, for his guitar playing. It's very unique. When people talk about the greatest guitarist of all time, he's never featured high on the list. I think he has the most unique style and taste as far as his playing goes. And along with Jack Cassidy, they make a great pair with Hot Tuna. And I think this album has some gems. It definitely has some gems, but it's always been very low rated in their discography, and I dig it. Bark from 1970 from Jefferson Airplane. Another one, too, from 1974. I'm not a huge Rush fan. I like some songs here, I like some songs there. And there's something about this first album I find really, really, really cool. Just titled Rush. Neil Peart wasn't in the band at this point. They were just kind of a straight-ahead hard rock band. I've always loved Alex Lifeson's guitar playing, but I love his sound, too. Before, like those early 80s albums, I loved his guitar sound. Very warm, that very, just really nice distortion. You have Working Man on here, which was a huge hit for them on FM radio. It ends the album. I just think that song rocks to this day. There's some other great tracks on here. Finding My Way, Here Again, What You're Doing. Just a straight ahead, great hard rock album from the mid-70s. What I love about hard rock albums from the 70s is they have such a nice warm feel, whether it's Sabbath or Zeppelin or whatever. All those albums were produced really, really well, really, really natural sounding, whereas in the 80s, they pumped up the volume on the drums. Everything sounded so synthetic and just very, just very plastic sounding. Here, it just sounds like a band playing in a garage. You hear everything as it was meant to be heard. I think it's great. First Rush album, 1974, and very, very panned by a lot of critics. Another album, too, very panned, considered the worst album in their discography. I totally disagree, and that is Radiohead's Pablo Honey. How could this be the worst in their discography when you've got King of Limbs? Now, that is a horrible record. Terrible record, King of Limbs. There's some great tracks on here. One being Vegetable, has this kind of Neil Young guitar that starts it off. The last song on here is fantastic, called Blowout, which kind of foreshadows their sound on the Bends the next time around. And though it has Creep on here, I'm kind of really tired of that track. I'll be honest with you, I never liked the song Creep. But you've got Stop Whispering, Thinking About You, Prove Yourself, I think it's a fine record. Yeah, it's not the Bends, it's not OK Computer, but to rate it the lowest album in their discography is just, that's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I think this is the most rocking Radiohead ever were. Yes, they were still trying to find their sound, but come on. The lowest on their discography, King of Limbs to me is the worst. So this is another one, Pablo Honey by Radiohead from '93. Another one here from Mr. Elvis Castello. Now, I love his Columbia period. Most of those records, I think, are just fantastic. When he moved to Warner Brothers, the content wasn't as consistent. But love this album here, the Juliet Letters with the Brodsky Quartet. I love Elvis Costello's voice with this, in this kind of vein here, with this classical background in back of him. I think it's fantastic. I think this album is really overlooked. It's not very highly rated. There's a song in here I really, really dig. Excuse me while I get my glasses here. There it is. Jackson's Monk and Row is a fantastic track. And it's one of these albums where you got to hear all the way through from start to finish. Has a great flow to it. But again, very, very not highly regarded. Very low rated on the Elvis Costello spectrum. But I think it's great. The Juliet Letters, Elvis Costello from '93 with the Brodsky Quartet. I don't know if it's nostalgia or what, but I like this album by James Taylor, In the Pocket. I think it reminds me of the summer of '76. I was 11. I heard this album a lot playing around the house. Has the hit Shower the People on here. There's another great track on here called A Junkie's Lament with some great backup vocals by Carly Simon. And though it's spotty in parts, there are some really cool tracks on here. One called The Money Machine. Slow Burning Love is a great ballad. Everyone Has the Blues, Daddy's All Gone. Yeah, it's not a 5-star, but I like it. It's great. In the Pocket by James Taylor from '76. And the last one on the list is the lowest rated Beatles album, next to Beatles for Sale. I'm talking about the Yellow Submarine soundtrack. Yes, it's not a real Beatles album, but there's 2 songs on here. One in particular, I feel, is one of the greatest Beatles songs of all time, and that is George Harrison's It's All Too Much. Why do people not talk about that song enough? To me, it belongs right up there with Tomorrow Never Knows, Lusky in the Sky with Diamonds, I Am the Walrus, all those great psychedelic tracks. It's such an absolute masterwork. It's All Too Much. And who played the lead guitar on that track? Was it Paul? Was it John? Was it George? I know I read George was playing the opening keyboard part. There's so much going on in that track. It's almost like it presages rave. This is like a rave track from 1967. It was recorded right after Sgt. Pepper was completed. If they had put that song on Sgt. Pepper, can you imagine how better Sgt. Pepper would have been? Maybe thrown off When I'm 64 and She's Leaving Home, threw in It's All Too Much. What an amazing, amazing track list that would have been, right? I just think it's one of the greatest Beatles tracks. It's All Too Much. There's so much to listen to every time you listen to it. There's something new to listen to every time you hear it. Incredible track. One of my all-time favorite George Harrison tracks. Plus, you've got It's Only a Northern Song, which is featured in the middle of the film when they're in the submarine. That's a great, great psychedelic track by George. You got Hey Bulldog by John Lennon. Great rocker. Of course, you got Paul McCartney's All Together Now, just a fun little tune. Then you've got, Yellow Submarine and All You Need Is Love, which we've heard before. But I think side 2 is quite good. I think the score for the film by George Martin is excellent. I admit I don't play it all the time, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's really well composed, and I think in the movie it fits in really well. So, it's this album. I have included it at the bottom of my list of Beatle records, but I have to admit, it has some really great material on it. So Yellow Submarine by the Beatles, another kind of, shall we say, panned album by the Beatles. And that's it, my friends. Throw in some of your favorite panned albums in the comment section. No one's judging. And we will, please press the subscribe button, and we'll see you soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.